I just think it's fascinating, the Furness Peninsula. And when you come to lovely little places like Urswick, Aldingham, all these beautiful villages we have within the Furness Peninsula. And each little village has its own story. And I've been fascinated for a long time with the difference between Great Urswick, or as it's known locally, Gutoswick, and Lyle-Oswick, which is just up the road. And the history goes back to the 1100s when our Norman invader, this guy called Michael the Fleming, landed down on the coast road and set up his first Motte and Bailey castle there. And then of course as he took over the area, it soon became known as Michael's Land, after Michael the Fleming. And then through a series of corruption through Mike and Muckle and so on, then eventually this area became known as Muchland. And if you're lucky enough to go into Urswick Church and look at some of the old gravestones, you will see there quite clearly this wonderful name of Much Urswick. And it's not too big a jump to go from Much to Great Urswick. And that's simply how the word Great Urswick came about. This is yet another one of those oddities that really helped to create the interest of the Furness Peninsula. And a few years ago I was here and I saw this hole in the wall that on the face of it doesn't look much, but I have had an expert and he's confirmed to me that this is a thing known as a mast-dial. It dates back to medieval times. And when people in the village were coming to the church and not knowing the times, because obviously they didn't have watches, then a stick would be placed in this hole here and the shadow that was cast by the sun would light up onto these. It's basically a sundial, but it's known specifically as a mast-dial, just to let people know that it was time for mass. These marks here, I've seen these on a few ancient churches, certainly in the Lake District, and I was told provisionally that there was a law that every young child under the age of 21, or every young adult, would have to practice archery on a Sunday morning. And it was said that these marks were where they sharpened the arrows before archery practice. I've never been convinced of that. And I spoke to a local, and he believed that outside the church, as people were leaving after the service, there was a table outside the church where the local butcher would cut up meat ready to sell to people for the Sunday roast. So I think the first story is nice, but I've no evidence of it. The second story about it being a butcher's carving stone perhaps is more relevant. But equally just below it we have these wonderful iron inlets in here. This one's missing, but there's one here. And I talked to the vicar of the church years ago, and he told me that in the days of Victorian days of Burke and Hare, when people could actually come and steal bodies and sell bodies for research, then the relatives were allowed to guard the body by resting overnight in this part of the church here, and a chain would be put across here to stop cattle from wandering into the church while they were resting there looking after the loved ones who had just been buried in this wonderful churchyard. There are many, many mysteries within Furness, and often some are unexplained, and history has given us a lot of deviations of ideas over the years. And one of the mysteries, of course, in Urswick, and certainly in this incredible church, is this Tunwinny cross that sits proudly in here. It was said that this was found, well, it wasn't said, it was found in the church during some renovations, and it's turned out to be a Viking cross, and that it's been placed in here because it shows this very early invasion of the Furness Peninsula and things that were happening. There's always been a crossover between sort of Viking and Norman invaders, and certainly paganism as well, which I'll talk about briefly later on. But the Tunwinny cross is a real oddity, and there's certain historians do believe, if we look here we can see the original Viking runes marked on the stone here, and it's said that this is St. Patrick and St. Cuthbert together within this church. Again, I've got to point out that I have no direct evidence of that, but nevertheless this does show a great part of our very, very early history here within Furness.